Hi guys, so we're a bit behind of time, behind of schedule. הצטרפו אלינו עכשיו עוד כמה חברים, וזו הזדמנות מצוינת גם להודות לספונסרים שלנו הערב. דבר ראשון, קולידור ונצ'ר. קוליידר ונצ'ר. אחד מהמקימים, אבישי עובדיה, שיש לו הרבה זכויות פה בקהילת הפינטק או בקהילת הבלוקצ'יין שהוא הקים לפני 4 שנים בעצם, משהו כזה. אז בוא, מוזמן להצטרף אלינו. יובל, איפה יובל וירסברגר? יובל מאחורנית שם, כן. יובל שהוא יזם סדרתי ומנכ"ל, מייסד ומנכ"ל של חברת SolidBlock, והחבר השלישי, ג'ונתן קרס, עוד יזם סדרתי ושותף ב-Lion Chain Capital, גם הוא, גם אבישי הם משקיעים בתחום הזה של בלוקצ'יין. אז תרשמו לכם. אז מה שאני מציע בעצם, הזכירו פה גם יואב, הזכיר את המילה DeFi. נכון? אתה הזכרת את DeFi. Jonathan, what is DeFi? What's DeFi?
DeFi stands for decentralized finance, and we've already seen everybody understands English, so you don't have to hear me break my teeth with the Hebrew. The difference between what's called DeFi or decentralized finance really comes from two main elements of it. One is that it tends to be open source software. It's open source software where any one entrepreneur can come and advance the entire DeFi industry by looking at the code that was published by previous entrepreneurs. The second is that it's published on an immutable ledger, meaning that when I build on top of a pre-existing financial primitive, I know that that pre-existing financial primitive is going to be consistent. Meaning, if I were to, let's take a comparison in the centralized finance world, like a payment channel, like Paybox or Bit. If I wanted to create a startup and I wanted to build something on top of Bit, I would need Bit's permission in order to do that. And if I built something that was valuable enough or exciting enough, I would always have the risk and fear that Bit could turn me off. And then my business would fall apart. That's the same with PayPal, that's the same with any type of a bank. Because you're not building on an immutable system, you're building on a system that can change over time.
And even more than that, you can even copy and fork an existing platform and basically duplicate it and create a better solution. Better
on top of it.
Not even on top of it. You create in
So those are the core value drivers. And what we see, DeFi as an industry is about 2 years old. You could argue it's about 3 years old. But what we've seen come from it is money transfers, lending, borrowing, insurance, savings accounts, checking accounts. We've seen a number of peer-to-peer investment platforms. We've seen businesses that reproduce traditional fintech businesses and then have cash flows that can be distributed to the owners of the networks. And then those owners can exist all over the world. So it's really been kind of an open playing field that has developed far more rapidly than the traditional fintech, because it solved many of the core problems that plague the traditional fintech, which primarily come from the regulatory environment.
Michelle, you see a lot of ventures, a lot of opportunities every day that you daily job. Where do you see the opportunities in the DeFi world? Where you can identify the opportunities?
So, first of all, in Collider Labs, it's another vehicle by Collider, like similar to Accelerator. We invest very early. So, most of the investments are in fields that perhaps Bank Israel over there won't be happy about. Like we have one company that basically enables you to create stablecoin for any token out there. Like create and back your own stability with the token that you initiated. So it's like even an ecosystem within an ecosystem. And I think stablecoin is one of the most interesting parts. Every company today engage in some way with stablecoin. I think insurance. We invested in 3 companies so far, and we are incubating more insurance companies in this field. Insurance, I believe that, by the way, like we all know Lemonade, right? Right now, Lemonade is like a tradable company, but I think that Lemonade is like 2.5. It's like another step between Web3 because there is an alignment of interest. But insurance is a big industry, and the last one that I would mention is I think after we discuss about like the basic, which is stablecoins and insurance, then we have saving accounts. Within saving accounts, basically enables you to not be part of the bank. Okay, so just taking the banks out of it and let you talk and trade and exchange and save and lend, all of that peer to peer without any authority on top, without the third party.
Yuval, you actually built kind of DeFi product. Can you tell about it a little bit?
Sure. So, my company SolidBlock, we basically built a functionality for real estate asset owners to be able to easily take their real world asset and then convert it into a digital asset, and be able to tokenize it, put it on the blockchain, and enable secondary trading on those real world assets. In doing that, we also discovered that we can integrate into the DeFi space in the sense that once we've actually transferred that value of the real estate into a digital form, we can actually tap into the DeFi market in terms of lending, in terms of borrowing, also in terms of insurance, and actually creating sort of a digital bank and leveraging this digital world for real world assets. So it's a hybrid play between real world assets and the DeFi space.
I want to open it for the public. If you have any questions to the guys at the panel.
So out of all this industry, the DeFi industry, and the different uses that you described, how much of that is currently actually serving, Bitcoin Mechadera, as opposed to how much of this is still on R&D or serving the industry that is kind of serving itself?
First of all, most of it being used only in the crypto community. Okay, but we are already familiar with a few protocols. One of them is Anchor. Anchor is a protocol on top of the Terra ecosystem. A decentralized lending and borrowing with basically a stable yield mechanism. And they already signed with Prime Trust and Kingdom Trust to basically take pension funds from the US, connect them into Anchor, and basically they will get the yield that you can get in a decentralized way, in a centralized way. So you already see bridges. We are, as a fund, in touch with one of the biggest pension funds here in Israel, and they want to enable their clients also to provide, to earn from the yield in the crypto ecosystem, and we will create like a bridge between the worlds. So I would say, I'm not sure if it will happen in this cycle, but it will probably, most of it will happen in the next cycle, because we know that crypto moves by cycles. But we see already development, so it's happening.
In terms of practical use cases, some of them that we mentioned to date, primarily around liquidity provisioning, insurance, and lending and borrowing. Those are the main use cases. The barrier to entry to enter into the system, to understand what's the difference between a reputable project and a non-reputable project is still very challenging for someone that's just entered. In addition, once you're familiar with the ecosystem, the on-ramps and the off-ramps of getting your money out of a bank and then into a decentralized bank still offers a lot of friction. Here, even in Israel, citizens are prohibited from moving from one side of the fence to the other side of the fence. So it's these types of primarily regulatory challenges and just lack of familiarity that I think prevents adoption. That being said, we're still at a point today where 2 years ago there was maybe about 5,000 to 10,000 monthly participants, and now we're at about 2 million monthly participants. So if we see the worldwide, so if we see the industry continuing to grow at the rate that it has been growing, then we're probably going to get a leapfrog event, similar to how some developing countries never got landlines; they just went straight to cell phones. We see that in Africa. You see that in some Asian countries. So I anticipate that the next generation, like I wouldn't be surprised if my children never actually used what we call today a bank, but rather what they just used was some type of a bridge that allowed them to receive fiat currency, currency that is issued by a government, and then perform their traditional banking tools within a decentralized global ecosystem, and then the only touch points would just be to access the legacy industry.
We're actually working with a company now that's enabling people to buy digital assets using their IRA accounts and using their retirement funds. So at least in the U.S., you have the ability to get to be able to trade crypto and to buy digital products using your tax efficient products. Let's call it that. So there's definitely a bridge, and there's definitely a lot of people moving into that, into moving traditional finances into the crypto space.
עודד, גם לפני שאתה, יואל, הזכרת את הנושא של שינוי קטן ברגולציה שמוביל לשינוי גדול, למהלך גדול. איפה אתם רואים את האתגרים הרגולטוריים פה? יש בכלל אתגרים. Where do you see the regulatory challenges?
I've had my bank account. I've had my bank account frozen because of interacting with this industry. I think that it's unfortunate, but the Bank of Israel or the Israeli regulators view it as if it was a casino or as if it was some type of nefarious service. So if I choose to invest in a business and to own a portion of that business where I'm not investing through a traditional boursa like NASDAQ, but rather I'm investing in the ownership by owning a percentage of the governance token of that network, and then I want to receive future cash flows of that network, which are denominated in stable coins. If I attempt to bring that money back to Israel and have it benefit the Israeli economy, my account will be frozen today.
Yeah, we're definitely not playing in. Our business is a securities company. We're actually issuing traditional securities and backing them with digital assets. So we're definitely playing in a regulated space and working with the regulators to build that out. It's a little bit different than the crypto space, which is decentralized and is not necessarily following. We're definitely abiding by KYC AML regulation and obviously working with different regulators in different jurisdictions to enable this type of digital trade of real world security.
So on top of what Jonathan said, I think I'm not sure if it's like a barrier in terms of regulation, but the taxation today in Israel, there is uncertainty to all of our portfolio. Okay, and this is why they are just operating abroad. I think it's a problem for the entire fintech ecosystem. I remember Dan Sidon, I think I was like in another conference with him. He mentioned that, but there is more clarity around the world, basically in every country around the world than in Israel. And entrepreneurs and companies are very afraid of what will be the tax for them. And also, I think that there are countries who are like Germany. In Germany, you can, after a year without selling your Bitcoin, you can reduce your taxation tokenization dramatically, also in the US today, and we are lagging behind them. And I can tell you, as an investor, companies are not operating here, and we are losing a lot of money because of that.
יש לי שאלה, זה אומר שבסופו של יום ג'פי יחליף לבנקים? זה רק, כלומר לא יצטרך לבחון בנקים ונכנסו? ואין לזה זה השלכות?
אני מקווה שלא יהיו בנקים. אני מקווה שבעתיד העולם שלנו יראה עולם ללא גוף שלישי מפקח, ויהיה ריצה לתחתית מבחינת עמלות, ומה שיקרה בסוף זה שיהיו נותני שירותים, כמו במצגת השנייה, אבל הם בסופו של דבר יהיו נותני שירותים שירוויחו ממוצרי פרימיום, ולא בגלל שהם נותנים לך איזשהו שירות בסיסי. מה שכל אחד מהחברים פה בונה הוא גם מוצר שאת יכולה לקרוא לו בנק, אבל הוא לא יהיה בנק בגלל שהוא לא יהיה עם גורם שלישי מפקח. זאת אומרת שהוא יצליח לחתוך הרבה אנשים שגוזרים עמלה בדרך. לא, בנק, חברות כרטיסי אשראי, 3% כל פעם שאת צולקת לבעל הקופה. יש מוצר שאנחנו מכירים שמאפשר היום סליקה בחינם, בקוריאה, עם אפליקציה, והוא גם מבוסס על טכנולוגיה של בלוקצ'יין, אז אין את הבעיה הזאת. ואם נצליח לכתוב עוד ועוד דברים כאלה, גם בביטוח לדוגמה. זה מיני סיטואציה, ויש לנו חברה כזאת של ביטוח מבוזר, שכל הצדדים זורקים כסף לתוך השוק. אם נשאר כסף בסוף שנה, הכסף חוזר, ולא הולך לבעלי המניות שלו.
I think there will always be, there's always going to be an opportunity to provide a quality customer service. And I think that a lot of the companies that we have today that provide, you could call it a full stack service, like they might be the custodian of your money. They might provide for you to access global marketplaces. They might be the place that you go to get a mortgage for your house. That's what we traditionally call a bank today. I think that a lot of those services will be able to move to either a more level playing field amongst competition. Because today there's the old guard. There's only a very small group of people that are permitted to be able to operate within those industries. Specifically, here in Israel and also pretty much in any modern country, there's top-down licensing to operate a bank or to perform banking services. So I anticipate that as there's more and more competition from an open playing field, then you'll end up with a similar encounter to how the internet developed. Whereas initially the internet was like a company called AOL, where they provided the lines, they provided, you dialed into their services, they were your email, they were your browser, they were everything. And then over time, each one of those services that they provided was opened up for competition. And then today, even if you are a customer of AOL, and they still have millions of customers around the world, the main value driver that they provide is more of a customer support and media service, as opposed to the entire infrastructure that they were 20 years ago.
אני רגע אענה על זה במקום אחר. הם דיברו על סטייבל, על מטבעות שהם צמודים לדולר או צמודים לשקל. יש היום עוד מטבע שהוא לא הוזכר, שהוא נקרא USDC, שהוא מונפק על ידי סירקל, שזו חברה תחת רגולציה בארצות הברית. והמטבע הזה הולך ומתבסס כמטבע שהוא היום, אנחנו לדוגמה כמשקיעים דורשים להשקיע רק בו ורוצים לקבל רק בו, כי אנחנו יודעים שהוא תחת רגולציה. נוח לנו יותר לסמוך עליו. דווקא זה משעשע, כי אנחנו מאמינים בעולם הזה, אבל בכל מה שקשור לגישה לכסף ולאתיקה שלנו, אנחנו כן רוצים לסמוך את הידיים. אז אם בנק ישראל ינפיק מחר בבוקר את ה-CBDC שאנחנו מאוד נשמח, אנחנו נרצה להשתמש בו וניקח אותו למקומות המקצועיים שלנו. יקרה מה שיקרה, אבל עדיין נהיה אותו מטבע שהם ינפיקו. אין לנו בעיה, כאילו אנחנו נשמח לכל מטבע דיגיטלי שנוכל להשתמש בו, וזה בסדר. בסדר שלא כולם יהיו מבוזרים. מדינה לא בהכרח צריכה שהמטבע שמייצג אותה, הריבוני שלה, יהיה מבוזר. היא צריכה לשלוט, היא צריכה לעשות איתו.
כן, אבל אני התכוונתי כמובן שכאילו, שבמקום שעכשיו יהיה בנקים, בנקים לאומיים, פועלים כל עכשיו שיש לנו, שיבואו לדיוק נפתים בין בנק ישראל, וזה לא הרבה יותר.
יהיה לך הרבה יותר אפשרויות.
כן, השאלה יוצא לבנק ישראל, האם זה משהו שהוא מוכן?
בנק ישראל החליט, או המחוקק החליט, מאיזה סוג של שירות הוא דורש רישיון, ומי הוא לא דורש רישיון.
The legacy bank system under the Bank of Israel, one of the things that Bank of Israel requires from the bank is to run financial risk management solutions like Basel Accord for credit risk, or running VAR reports for market risk. Is there any consideration in your companies or investment to use risk management, financial risk management solutions that are under the regulator?
It becomes a point of failure, though, is that, again, it's that just like the same reason why there's risks associated with building as an entrepreneur, with building on top of PayPal, even though they provide an open SDK, they can easily turn it off, either from a monopolistic perspective, that they want to bring in whatever service or product market fit that you may have discovered, bring it in-house to compete directly with you. Or it could be that they, for whatever reason, don't like what it is that you're doing. So while reputation scores or reputation management as a means of being able to assess risks are incredibly useful, it's still a challenge as to how you could create an open banking system that would be dependent on those. It's I've seen over the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years now within the crypto space, or in the last 2 years within the DeFi space, concepts of credit rating on your accounts. It is significantly immature, and there hasn't been really any breakthroughs that I've seen. Maybe, Avishai, you've seen something more positive in recent developments. But I think that it's inevitable that there will be alternatives to the centralized credit score system that we have in the market today, to something that's open and lends itself to a censorship-resistant system of the future.
Yeah, you just asked us to the credit side, but we also have the market side. That whenever you go like a bank or somewhere where you put the money and they create liquidity pools and go in another currency, the market can crash, and then the bank will say, "Oh, I don't have money."
I think you already see that with the insurance ratings today. Is that if I want to buy insurance, let's say I wanted to open $1 million position, and I could put $1 million position here, and that might cost me 16% in interest a year, or that I have to put 16% up in order to insure that $1 million. Whereas another service might only cost 0.5%. So that's the market signaling that there's intrinsically more risk, market risk, in the service that's charging 16% to have it insured versus the service that's charging 0.5% to have it insured.
Maybe the one that is you have is the one who's going to pull the rug.
It could be. There could be insider trading. That's definitely something that we haven't solved in the centralized financial services. So it probably hasn't been solved in this service either.
Right now, due to the decentralized nature of DeFi and blockchain and whatnot, the processing speeds are often a lot slower than it would be for like a centralized organization like Visa. Do you see that as being a barrier to global adoption for DeFi or for blockchain-based solutions? And if so, what does that timeline look like in terms of catching up with those centralized organizations?
So not every blockchain, I would say, much slower than centralized solutions. Again, Terra, Polkadot, Solana, Polygon. So you have solutions out there, and Ethereum is in the process of switching to proof of stake. So it will be solvable. It will take some time, but Ethereum is now like hundreds of billions of worth of the network. You don't want to do mistakes over there, so it will take time. But I think again in the next cycle we'll have basically the base layer for bringing the mass adoption in to Ethereum especially.
ובזמן עוד שאלה אחת, אחרונה.
אני חושב שזה לא, זו שאלה בסופו של דבר שהיא רלוונטית. נגיד יש את וייזר, אוקיי? חברה, אתם מכירים, חברה שא' השקיעו בה, איזושהי חברה היא מתחברת לחשבון הבנק שלה ומנסה לעשות ניהול כלכלי, אוקיי? באותה מידה היא יכולה להתחבר לארנק הדיגיטלי או לארנק הקריפטוגרפי ולעשות ניהול כלכלי. פה אני לא רואה הבדלים. פשוט תלוי, ברגע שיהיה mass adoption, יבואו החברות וייתנו את אותם פתרונות שהן נותנות גם בתעשייה המסורתית, בתעשייה הזאת. זה אין הבדל. אבל כבר היום אפשר לראות שירותים שמאפשרים לך לנהל את ההון שלך, כולו נגיד בקריפטו, בצורה מאוד פשוטה, לדוגמה בלחיצת כפתור, לקבל 8% ריבית על ההחזקות שלך במטבע סטייבל. ב-USDC. ובלחיצת כפתור אחת נכנס לדבר הזה ויוצא. אני רואה את חוויית המשתמש שם מול חוויית המשתמש בבנק שלי, הרבה יותר נוח לי שם, ולא בבנק. בבנק צריך לעבור כל מיני דברים, אתה מרגיש שאתה צריך לאשר, פה אתה הרבה יותר מרגיש כמו שזה הכסף שלך. זה עוד לא מושלם, אבל יש כבר את ההתחלה.
טוב, אז תודה רבה, חברים. תודה רבה לכל מי שהגיע. יובל, יש לך תודה?
יש לנו, we have like a webinar series of educational materials. We're offering some kind of sweepstakes if you want to enter on the site, SolidBlock.co. See you guys there.
And I'm hiring. So if you are a content writer, if you're a content writer, a community manager, marketer, basically anything besides an engineer, I'll even take the engineers. If you're interested in crypto, I'd love to talk to you about the industry.